etc. Cool. First, Daniel and anyone that's watching, I apologize because I couldn't make it. The past few weeks, I've not been able to make it very consistently. I hope that this will improve, but yeah, who knows? I'm gonna take a second to ping Ed because he's from outside of the Drupal community. Well, doesn't pair. Ed is not from outside of the Drupal community. He's done a lot for the Drupal community, but his main focus is in the Ember community, which is an invaluable feedback. That's why I'm pinging him explicitly. But anyways, hey, Daniel.
Hi.
So what do we have?
We worked on the API version module. I think that's how it's called. Which goal is to somehow expose something like a version number, maybe, so that consumers can know against which version they currently talk to. There have been a lot of discussion about API versioning in the past, and it turns out it's a highly non-trivial, non-straightforward problem. Because there is, for example, no way in Drupal to maintain like two different storages. Because conceptually, if you have one API version and another API version, they could be incompatible. Like one could have a required field and the other one doesn't have this required field. And as such, they are like incompatible. Yeah.
Hi, Ed.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. We're talking about the feasibility of having proper API versioning, whatever that means, in Drupal. And spoiler alert, it's not possible. It's not feasible.
It's pretty hard.
We are going through the process of stating, the main blockers of that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Daniel.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, so one thing we have been trying to do is to at least expose a version number, like, or some kind of concept similar to that, so that consumers can at least identify with which version they currently talk, which might matter if you like deploy changes on production and change something so your consumers can like have different behavior depending on the IP version number or how you call it.
The current state of things, and correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel. Bless you. I think it's that we are not going to try to attempt to do any type of version negotiation because we cannot do that. We cannot do that because you may have a major version change, which means that you have a different Drupal because you cannot have both one Drupal that has two different sets of fields for a given entity and expect that when you create a new entity of that type, everything works. It's just not possible. So major version changes at the same time, we're not going to be able to support them. And anything other than that is also very difficult. However, we can expose like a checksum of sorts or a hash of the state of the API. So you know that, hey, my API calls are failing and I'm pointing at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or A, B, C, D, E, F or whatever that looks like. If it looks like a number or not, that's something TBD, I think. And we could be able to automate that, and the current state of mind is that we could work in somehow in the same paradigm that Git does, which is you have commit hashes, and we could have API state hashes, and then we could tag things in there. Like, for instance, you do a deploy, and you say, hey, I deployed this, and this is the version of the API that you're going to be running, and you give it a name, something that is user-friendly, maybe. But hey, this is just in discussions. It is really hard because none of the assumptions that you would expect of API versioning apply because of all the flexibility that Drupal brings and the buy-in that you have when using Drupal. And it's hard.
Yeah, maybe another way to frame the question is just giving people good instructions on what does the process actually look like to safely roll out a change, so that it's not a hard flag day where everything has to change at once, right? There's almost always a strategy to roll things out in stages, right? If it's a question of adding a new field, then it's okay for your existing clients should tolerate its presence, and then you can gradually begin to depend on it. If it's a question of removing a field, you have to roll out changes to all your clients first to remove the dependency, and then you can finally drop the field, right? And there's well-known patterns that I'm sure we've all encountered, and if you could write them down for people and think about how the tools would support the patterns, like an exact checksum of the API is probably less helpful in a case like that. Just to know that it's changed, it's actually better for your clients to be somewhat flexible about, as unopinionated as they can about unrelated things changing in the API, right? They care about very focused things like, I need this field to be here, but something unrelated on a content type they don't touch changing is not relevant to them. So exact identity of an API version is maybe less interesting than a more human-mediated version number that increments or something. Something much more like Semver, where it puts a lot of the burden on the human users to express what their intention of their API changes is. But then at least, you could establish patterns that the whole community would use, right? A breaking change requires a major version number bump on your API, and that's something that you as you actually have to know that as you're making that change, make that tactical decision.
That would be the goal, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we should be able to achieve something decent in the way, but like I've been using version negotiation just like in my API consumers, just like I do it in my NPM packages. I just specify a range and my API resolves, right? And that's great, but that's something that we cannot do with Drupal because we only have the latest version.
Right.
I think that if we somehow work in this module, the documentation or the UI or whatever, that to make that very clear that you are in version 3.2.17, and there is no way that you can go back to or make a request to 3.2.16, right? It is just not possible. It's just for you to know, or for right, you changing the version number here, and this is safe or this is not safe. Things may break. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, what I mean is like the clients themselves have to be able to do the most intelligent thing they can try to do, right? Because you're right, you're absolutely right. Drupal's not going to be able to give them a different version. So the best we can do is have Drupal give the clients a lot of information about what's there. And so, for example, if somebody wanted to write a client that was going to be future compatible across a planned breaking change on the Drupal side, can we make it easy for somebody to ship their client so the client itself has two swappable implementations, and it has something it can look at when it talks to Drupal to say, do I need to which of my implementations should I be using? And Drupal's going to say, I have this, and then the client can say, oh, okay, I need to switch to my new one now. And that lets you do releases that are not hard synchronously tied to each other, right? You can release the client changes first, test them out against test instances, have them all out, and maybe you've got 3 different clients you've got to release, right? And it takes a long time across your organization. they can all get out first, and then you can run the Drupal change and make it easy for all those clients to see something communicated by Drupal that says today's the day you're switching over. This is what I happen to be running right this second, or even just yeah, I mean in every single request or even per session or whatever, so that people could in a very staggered way roll out their Drupal change and have clients that can jump back and forth and talk to the old Drupal or the new Drupal state.
Yeah, I think that's a very big point. Yes, at least a way to state I'm in this version, and that would be super simple. I think. Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong. We could just drop a number there, and should not be super complex.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. It would. I mean, it would be also interesting to somehow expose it via the JSON schema, because that's something which is actually useful for the clients, right? Because the clients, and I know Waterwheel is doing that it actually introspects the schema. So like if in Waterwheel, I assume if you would save a value which isn't there, maybe it give you a helpful error message or something you can catch or something based upon the schema. So I think using that as well helps clients, I believe.
Right. Yeah. I think that's just a matter of making sure that this config is available to Schemata, to JSON API, or to whoever wants to make use of this. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's one of the things, and I like that this is starting to take shape. So something else that I wanted to share is that we currently have JWTs on top of auth 2, and using the simple auth module. And at the moment, we are missing some of the mandatory claims, and that kind of breaks some of the integrations in creative uses of those JWTs. Like, you don't need to have access to the Drupal database to validate the token. You could, given your certificates, you put them into your Node.js proxy, and that Node.js proxy is able to decrypt the JWT and do, stuff. Like, setups like that are possible right now, but you cannot use the expected tooling because there are some missing properties in a JSON object. So that's one of the things that need to be fixed. And there are a bunch of things in simple auth right now. The biggest is that you need to have both modules enabled in order for your site not to blow up, which is not ideal. That need to be fixed. And for JSON API, I think there was an interaction in between the meta tags JSON LD normalizer and the JSON API normalizer. I don't know how the JSON API normalizer would be triggered by meta tags. I think it's not clear to me if it's a bug in meta tags or in JSON API, but that needs to be addressed. And I think from the Drupal side, that may be it, unless anyone else has something. Right. So let's chat a little bit about Contenta. I think the distribution is doing good. There is a lot of awareness that it exists, which is good, I think. Some people have been already grown bored of it, which is great because it means that it is easy. Because some people just go there for the challenge, and when the challenge is done, they need to move to somewhere else. I think it's the GraphQL discussions are taking a lot of shape. I think that we need to sit in New York with Sebastian and see if the way of working with GraphQL, the GraphQL module in Drupal, aligns with the way that we've been using the JSON API module, or if that will require a lot of changes in Contenta for GraphQL to make it in. Because I think that it kind of makes you take decisions in the server in order to expose things in the backend. But I may be mistaken. I see that many people use views integration because it's convenient. That may be it. I want to talk about that stuff because GraphQL, I mean, many people like GraphQL. And yeah, I'm kind of curious to see what happens with Contenta. I know, probably at this point, and again, jump in if you think that I'm mistaken, it's a good thing that we are just letting this fly and doing fixes and maybe adding some nice features like API versions. But do you see any significant glaring gaps in Contenta, things that you're missing that you thought that there was actual active work because it is really broken?
I mean, I could ask questions here related to the stuff I put in the Slack channel earlier. So I just, in the last week, just picked up Contenta for the first time and tried it out and installed it and got the basic site going. And most of it was quite simple. It was great. It was really kudos to everybody. I'm trying to work with schema discovery type stuff, right? I'm trying to write tools that can, like general purpose editors that'll take at least any Contenta, or at least say any Drupal that's got JSON API, and give you kind of intelligent way to traverse and inspect and edit your content, right? So I'm interested in the kind of most aggressive schema discovery use cases, and I am finding gaps, or I just don't know where to look, where the right place to look is. So, for example, if I look at the example recipe site, I'm trying to find what are the proper ways to discover schema that would be robust against users changing the way they configure their Drupal. I really like that there's at the root of JSON API, we've got a resource with links to all the other endpoints. I found that and I was using that, and that was great. The tricky things I'm running into are not being able to traverse all the way from there to really comprehensive schema. And some of this might be complications of the JSON API extras rewriting things. But so is there a canonical way to discover the schema of a given resource?
Right now, I think I understand where you're going, and I want to first point out that the JSON API extras overrides should be picked up by the schema generation. So if you change the type, you should also provide it is just a method that that says, hey, the new schema looks like this for this property. So that should be taken care of. If it's not working, it's a bug, but it's supposed to be working. And secondly, if I understand correctly, it would just be a matter to enhance the hypermedia. Maybe we could say we could put in the meta section of an entity a link to the schema of that entity type. Maybe that's an overkill, but with gzip, I don't think that really matters.
No, I think it's okay, but it's also, and there's already something kind of like that, which is we have a relationship to the content type, which very conceptually is basically kind of a schema definition, right? And I know it has its own Drupalisms to it, and so maybe it makes sense that it would be continue to be a separate thing, or maybe just whatever the schema modules expose, they're really just a facade against the content types resource. But so those are there. Yeah, those are there and those are good, but schema also stands alone from any entity, right? If somebody sets up their Drupal and creates all the structure but has no content yet, I still want to be able to discover what kind of content's allowed. So if the entities point at the content type, you won't find them until you have your first entity. It would make a little more sense in the meta on the collection. So like if you fetched an empty collection of recipes, you'd still be able to discover what schema of recipes is allowed. That way you could actually give somebody a UI that would let them make the first one.
So what is a little bit confusing for me is that isn't that exactly the use case of like OpenAPI?
Maybe I don't. So maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just missing it. I haven't tried that out. Is that the solution to my problem?
I mean, you can go to like /OpenAPI/JSON API. I just paste the URL, and that gives you like all the schemas of all the things.
That sounds great.
I think that, but that is just a web UI. I think what Ed was referring to was a programmatic way to access schemas to do intelligent stuff in the front ends.
And so this URL which I posted is basically returning JSON.
No, it is. Yeah, that looks cool. Yeah,
awesome.
So that helps. I will check it out.
Like it's basically what like WeDoc, so like the API browser is using.
Cool.
I
will check this out. This is great. That's why I wanted to ask you guys, because I was guessing there was more than I was finding. So one of the concrete questions that I'm trying to answer as a motivating example, in the Contenta example app, recipes have a difficulty field, and the difficulty field has like 3 allowed string values only. Will this schema let me discover those 3 allowed values so I can render a dropdown?
Yes.
Great. Okay, great. Good.
It should translate into an enum. And if you want to go straight from entity type and bundle to a schema, there is a hard-coded URL template, which is /schemata, /entity type ID, and /bundle. But that's not documented anywhere except in the schemata project page.
And I did find those just from searching around, but
yeah,
those didn't seem to have the enum I was looking for either, which was what led me to keep exploring. Okay.
Yeah, I'm currently looking at least at the schema for like recipes, and I don't see an enum in there. Like difficulty is marked as string.
Right.
Which might be, in quotes, just a bug.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe I should look into filing bugs for things I find, and we can fix those. Yeah. Cool. All right. So then it sounds like, so as far as Contenta goes, there is OpenAPI and Schemata are included. Are those just different flavors trying to do the same thing, or is there a clear separation of responsibilities?
No, Schemata is generating the schemas for the resource types, and OpenAPI adds a bunch of stuff in that. So there is the schema, which describes the shape of the output, and there is also the ways that you can interact with the resource.
I see. Okay.
So OpenAPI takes care of of that, and Schemata only takes care of describing the shape.
Okay, I see. Good. Okay, cool.
Awesome. I think that we only have 2 minutes left. Sorry, but I want to call to Carlos, Jan, and Rakesh to see if they wanted to mention anything for the call, or just read only.
Yeah, I would like to talk just one. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Just 30 seconds about GraphQL. I think today Contenta is built around JSON API, and that's great. I'm not sure it should care about GraphQL. Maybe it would be for another distribution, or you know what I mean? There is a lot of work on JSON API, and that's fine, and that's a very cool product. I'm not sure it is really possible to mix the two in the same distribution, because there is a lot of differences. And maybe we should say, well, GraphQL is not part of Contenta because JSON API is already a lot of work. I don't know, just asking the question. Maybe we should say something like that.
Yeah, I kind of tried to touch a little bit on that at the beginning of the call. There are many questions like that. I don't see why they cannot coexist. I mean, they are tools that are very similar in purpose, but people just find uses for tools that you don't anticipate. Think it can make sense to have something under the Contenta umbrella in the future. Not sure if under the same distribution, GraphQL flavored Contenta would be more applicable or what. Definitely want to talk to Sebastian and the GraphQL guys this next weekend in New York and see how we can start making baby steps towards that.
Okay.
How are you finding GraphQL? You liking it? The Drupal module?
I'm working with it now. I like JSON IPA and I like GraphQL both, but I'm working with GraphQL on my JavaScript projects all the time, so I don't want to.
So it is ready for using in projects because you are using it. Nice. Well, I think that they said that they are using it in many projects. So cool. Carlos, I see that Rakesh says that he's here only reading. You have anything?
I'm good, man. Been really informative session and meeting. Everything good.
Awesome. It's always nice to hear you boys again. Cool. Well, I think that we made it to 31 minutes this time. So I guess that if anyone has anything, I'm happy to stay a couple more minutes. But if anyone wants to drop, just feel free.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, Matthew.